Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. All right, thank you, Mr. Producer. Welcome back. I am joined by the one and only Miss Tammy Goen. Tammy, welcome back to the program. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here again, Casey. Always enjoy it.
Yeah, me too. Because I never knew what a highly sensitive person was, an HSP. Can you tell the audience a little bit about your work and a little bit about HSPs? Because, like I said, I didn't know in the beginning until I've learned from you. So maybe you can talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. High sensitivity really is all about processing information. And so that tends to be much deeper. So things really affect us quite a lot, more so than the non-highly sensitives. And it really is, it's 20% of the population. So there's a lot more of us out there than are even recognized. And a lot of us, we always know we're sensitive for our whole lives, but we don't always become aware of it as a trait, that's something that other people share. Until, I get people all the time that it's like, oh, I just discovered this. Oh my gosh, this is a life changer. So I really, like to help other HSPs to navigate that understanding and awareness and honoring their sensitivities, and then learning what to do about that, how to interact in a world that's really designed more for that 80% of non-highly sensitives. So it's a passion.
Gotcha. Now, and excuse me if I repeat some questions or whatever, because
Absolutely.
not everyone saw like every episode. So that's where that's coming from, because there are some things that the audience needs to know, depending on where we go, because we got a great topic today. You're going to tell us about the HSPs in the work and the business world, how that works. But before we get there, can I just go over again? Is this something that you're born with, or something that might have happened or triggered us to be this way?
Right. Yeah, it is a genetic trait. We are born with it. You can usually tell from kids, babies, from day one, really, sometimes even in the womb. So it's, it's definitely a genetic trait, that it's not something that we choose. It's not something that we just develop according to our background. Things that we experience, such as trauma or not having enough support, can definitely exacerbate certain things, aspects of it, or make it more challenging. Those who have a really supportive upbringing and childhood tend to have even more resources available to them, emotionally, physically, in terms of how they approach the world. But those who have a really rough start tend to have fewer than normal, and can often lead to a higher incidence of substance abuse or depression, anxiety, that kind of thing. So it's always there. Once we can become aware that it is an actual trait that is genetic and it's just the way we're wired, then we can learn how to cope, better, and how to share that with other people to get the support that we need.
Gotcha. Tammy, if left unnoticed or left unaware of this, and I keep struggling for the word for it, is it condition? Is that
it's a trait.
offensive? A trait. Okay, trait.
Yeah.
So for people who have this trait and are unaware, do you see, if left untreated and unaware, do you see it turning into people either narcissistic or big ego, constantly having to prove themselves because of the sensitivity and the feeling that comes along with it? Is that common?
Yeah, we actually tend to shut down a lot, we hear a lot that we need to be different. You're to this, to that. You need to let this go. You need that kind of stuff. So that we start to develop a lot of self-doubt. And actually, highly sensitives tend to be the ones that get connected with narcissistic folks, or those who are less compassionate and feeling, and use that fact that we are very compassionate and intuitive and strong emotions, strong feelings to things. So we can get into relationships with people that are not good for us, that are not healthy. but like with anything, when we're very uncomfortable with who we are, then we can definitely adopt, patterns that aren't helpful, like being a little egotistical or arrogant maybe, or something like that. But we do tend toward, pulling back and not engaging as much, or second guessing ourselves a lot.
I see. Are you, would you say you guys are more or less trusting than people without the trait?
That's a really good question, because initially we want to trust everyone, and we want to help everyone feel better and really have really strong, we're definitely not antisocial. We just don't tend to like big crowds, but we like to have a really deep, intimate connection with people. So we can tend to, for a while, be maybe a little more trusting, but then as we continue to have experiences where we're told we're not okay in some form, or that's how we take it, at least, then we can start to discount our own reactions or experience, because we tend to be very intuitive, and we can kind of get a feel for a situation or a person. And if we listen to that right away, we tend to be pretty right on. But we start to discount that sometimes when, as we go. So sometimes we can trust, but then we learn to like, I'm going to doubt that now.
Yeah.
So
And
it's kind of, yeah.
it could probably, does it lead to isolation sometimes? Because you're like, yeah, my first instinct, okay. But then, and you said something before that just put a trigger in me, is when somebody tells you you should, or the other one is what you should do, immediately, that's something that I don't know if it's just with HSP, but some people, it probably the rudest thing you could say, right?
Right. Well, and so HSPs, we do tend to take things really personally.
Okay. That's probably the better question.
Yeah. So that can be definitely, I mean, and generally HSPs throughout our whole lives, we have heard things like, you're too this, too that, too sensitive. You hold on to things too long, just let it go. It's no big deal. You're making it a big deal, and it's not. So questioning, like, what is going on with me? Why don't I see it the way this person does, and why is it such a big deal? And so then we start to, that's where a lot of that self-doubt and not honoring ourselves, comes in, because we do hear a lot of that. And we get that feeling like we just need to be fixed somehow. We have to find the solution to not be like this anymore.
Yeah.
Because it either makes other people feel uncomfortable, or it just doesn't flow with what the world is setting up, for us. And so sometimes it can be isolating, in terms of just like, I don't want to deal with all of that. I'm just going to stay home, stay in my little bubble, and
I'm okay here.
There. Right. Yeah. So we do have to work a little bit to step outside the box and have that set up, so we have the right boundaries and expectations and all of that, so that it works well for us, so that we can continue doing that. And of course, there are some, about 30% of HSPs are extroverted. So they're more likely to be the ones that are, getting out there and not isolating, but then they still have to be prepared for the fact that they can still get overwhelmed, because that's the main challenge probably for most HSPs, is getting overwhelmed by life.
Oh, okay.
So if they're really putting themselves out there a lot, then they can get to that point of overwhelm sooner, or without really being aware, because they're like, well, I asked for this, I wanted to come out here and, join this group or do this activity or whatever. And then maybe at the end of the day, that's a lot to add on to what's already been happening, but that's kind of their personality, right? They just want to do that. And so suddenly they're like, oh my gosh, I'm like shutting down, and I don't know why, because they reach that point of overwhelm.
Well, what's the best way to become aware and to, I don't want to use the term get help. I guess be aware is the main the main question about this trait I want to ask you. If we have this trait, what do we do?
So it is really helpful to work with someone, a coach, a guide, someone like me that understands it, if you're really, really struggling. But it's amazing how much it helps just to be aware, just to validate that it's okay, and it's not just you. So finding an inventory, I have a link to one of them on my LinkedIn page, and you can also go to Elaine Aaron's website, which is hsperson.com. And there's an inventory on there. You can take that and just kind of see everything written out, in black and white of what other people experience that tend to be highly sensitive. And then you go, oh, that's me.
Oh, okay. I
So
recognize
obviously it's
that.
not
Yeah.
just me because it's an inventory, it's online.
Right. Yeah.
So, and then she's got a lot of, her own resources. There's a lot of people out there that have resources, and you can get connected with that on my LinkedIn profile as well. But there's books like The Highly Sensitive Person, which is Elaine Aron's first book, is super helpful. It's validating, but it also shows the research results that she came up with, and it really explains what's going on, so that you can use that to help explain to other people what's going on. It's like, oh, I'm wired this way. Let me tell you what life is like for me, and then you can tell me what it's like for you, and then we can see where the differences are, but not say that anyone is right or wrong. But that's really validating to see that inventory and see where you kind of where you score along that spectrum, and then also be able to understand it more through reading or through like I do a meetup group every other week. And
I was gonna say that must be helpful.
Yeah, just to be with other people who are in the same situation, feeling the same way, having the same experiences, and they could we could just talk, and everyone knows they're understood, which is an unusual thing, and at the beginning at least, feeling understood. That's one of the things that we're always striving for, because we're the 20% that's kind of like over here, and it doesn't fit in with the majority, and so we're always in that place of I don't think these people get me, and I don't get them, because we come from a different place. But
right.
But I would say that's the taking that inventory and really seeing that and letting that validate, and then starting that process of just reading all you can, looking for blog posts. I have a lot of those on my website, and lots of people have blog posts specific for high sensitivity. So reading as much as you can, and just really educating yourself. And then if you're having a hard time still with the overwhelm, or with it just not getting to that place of honoring yourself for or without in spite of the trait, then it's good time to reach out to someone
Gotcha.
to, help you along that way. Because we can always look at other people's stuff and say, oh yeah, that's I would do this, do that, whatever. When it's happening to ourselves, it's that much more challenging without a guide, and that's why coaches have coaches. And
understood. So let's talk a little bit about the HSP at the workplace and at the business. Okay. What are some challenges that they face?
So for one, just the most obvious and in some ways easier to remedy, I guess, would be just the actual environment itself. So because we take in everything like a sponge, and we notice all different, sounds and movements and activity going on, like an open floor plan, office plan, is really challenging for an HSP. So having a way to like moderate the activity, the sound, any kind of input, if that can be set up in such a way that it's calmer. The lighting sometimes is even a big deal. But working with someone to say, what works for you, so that you can concentrate and focus and do your job, in the best way. So that's one, kind of external focus. And then also is, like, I guess you could say office politics or things like that. The social aspect of things can have an impact, because again, we kind of want everyone to just get along and everything to work well, but at the same time, we see things from all sides and what people need. So that can be really helpful. Like if you're in a group situation, kind of the HSP is going to be the one that says, oh, well, this would work for this person, this would work for that person. So allowing for that, that person to have that input, for the group, but also realizing that all of those things, if people are arguing with each other outside of work, or if they bring a bunch of stuff in with them, the HSP is going to be the one that is affected by all of that. They're going to pick up on all of those kinds of things. So having some kind of way to have communication and, like group get-togethers where we can kind of see how things are going, or that kind of thing, could be helpful. And even, random things like, I was thinking about this morning, actually, how, since we we see things from all these different perspectives, and we always have all these ideas, and we really want things to work. So in a work setting, that's really helpful, for a supervisor or boss or whatever, when you have one person who has just keeps coming up with all these ideas, like, oh, I hadn't thought about that way. That's great. But sometimes coworkers see that as like brown nosing, or, they get a little irritated if there's one person that's always like, I got an idea. So if there's some way for that person to be able to present ideas without everyone looking at them going, oh yeah, you have another idea. Great. Okay. So working with some of that social, the administrative piece of, if nothing else, just sitting down and saying, okay, I know that your sensitivities can be a real benefit to the company, to the business. How can I best support you? I mean, that would be ultimately the goal, to be able to have that, interaction. But also just recognizing that if people are given the tools or the situation, the environment to thrive, they will, and they will contribute a lot to the work environment. I mean, they are very focused on details, and they want to get things right, and they see things from all sides, and there's a lot of good problem solving, and they are the ones that are like, oh, this person could do better with this, or this person needs this style of whatever. And, so bringing all those things in can be really, really positive. As long as they're not spending all of their energy trying to just manage the environment or the emotional, emotions between all of the staff, or, things like that.
What would you say is a way to find the right career or the right job for someone with this trait?
Yeah, I think, if you do your classic career counseling type, do this inventory. Oh, this is what shows that you would be good at. We have to also recognize what our limits are to, like, am I good in a corporate setting, or am I good in a smaller business setting, or whatever, in terms of environment. So asking yourself those questions, because we do tend to be a helper. And
I would think better in the small, right?
Yeah, I mean, if we have more impact, if we feel we have more impact, then we're going to be happier. If we feel like we're just a number,
that's not going to work.
It's not going to be satisfying.
Yeah.
You can manage that if everything else is okay, if you're not overwhelmed by the environment, and you're not, put down, and, you have some support and stuff, so that could be okay, maybe not as rewarding, but that combined with other, just certain environments, if we really are honest with ourselves, we can say, that's probably not going to work for me, because I'll be very distracted all the time. And then the other is just being aware. So in my first career of sorts, I mean, I was a counselor, but I worked with survivors of all kinds of abuse.
Yeah.
And at the time I knew I was sensitive, but I didn't know of the sensitive trait. So I just went because I wanted to help. And I'm like, oh, well, that's a really amazing. I mean, these people really need my help. So it was rewarding, but I didn't.
Was it taking too much on?
It was. I just didn't. I did really great until I crashed. And
you couldn't take it anymore, right?
Yeah, it was just too intense for me. But if I'd known ahead of time, I could have definitely even increased my self-care. That would have helped. But I also could have said, well, I can have this many clients with this type of an issue, and then I'll have these other clients, because it's going to build up. It's going to take too much toll on
you. Just got bombarded with a lot of things that really hurt you, being like caring and being compassionate. And when you see so much, you just weren't ready for that, huh?
Yeah. And I thought I did great, because I was like, oh, I leave it at home, and I have my life, and it's all really great. But
I don't believe you.
It was kind of like being shoved down, because I remember things like, wow, I thought I heard the worst story I could ever hear. And then I'd have a new client and go, wow, I was wrong. Okay.
Right.
And then,
right.
So that, it would build up. And, but so if you're aware, you can say, okay, this might be challenging. I will have to set it up this way, and I'll see if that will work. But if we're honest there, and we just say, okay, am I doing this for money, and because I don't feel like there's any option, or do I really think I can do this? And ask yourself those questions of, does it feel rewarding? Is it following my passion? I mean, if you can do that, then you're great. But also, how's the environment? How's the work the milieu, I mean, does it feel okay? Like if you're going for an interview, for example, if you're working for someone, pay attention to all of those cues that you have. When you walk in the building, how do you feel? When you sit down with that person who's likely to be, in charge of your department or, your direct boss or whatever, how does that energy feel? And really listen to that, because it's not gonna get any better. If you're just like, well, I can handle it, it's probably not as big of a deal because I'm just, highly sensitive, whatever. That's the intuitive piece. That's the trusting piece, that piece of saying, I need to listen to myself, and this doesn't feel good. Yeah, I would make a lot of money, or yeah, I'd be solving that goal of helping people, whatever that happens to be. But we really need to just listen to how things feel, make sure it resonates. And then if that's the case, when there's just a few little things that are like, okay, yeah, I just need to learn how to talk to so-and-so about, what will help me thrive, in this environment. I just need to tweak this or tweak that. But ultimately, we really do need to be clear, up front that that's going to work.
Gotcha. We're almost out of time here, but Mr. Producer, do I have time for a question? I do. Okay, good. Let's do. Awesome. We can do a question, guys. We're speaking with Tammy Goen, and let's hear from the audience.
We have Dale in Atlanta wants to know: are HSPs better with constructive criticism from a supervisor, or do they tend to take offense to it?
That's a good question. And I did mention earlier, I think we do tend to take things personally. So a lot of it, if not all of it, has to do with the approach, how that's presented.
How it's done.
Yeah. If it's just, this isn't working, you need to do this, what's wrong with you?
What you should do.
Right. Then they'll probably have a harder time accepting that, taking it, because we also tend to do the what if game a lot more than average, probably. It's like, oh, well, what did I do? There must have been something, even if it was something really small, we can make it big, because we're like, oh, okay, well, what about this and what about that? And maybe I should have done that. And, right. So we like rethink it over and over
and all that. Yeah.
So it can be much bigger. But if the person is presenting and is like, hey, you're a really good employee, I value your services, this is coming up, what do you think? And allow there to be a dialogue, and it can be really well received, and a problem solving can happen, as a result of that. You can be like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I didn't realize that, I'm thinking this, and this might alleviate that, how does that work? And you create a solution. But we do tend to have a hard time if it's just, one-sided, top down, nothing, especially if it's done in an environment where others are around, if it's
that's got to be a
public kind of thing. That's going to be really challenging, because then the person's more likely to be saying, oh no, what is this person thinking of me now? What is this person thinking?
Right.
And that's very distracting for doing their work. Right. So doing one-on-one constructive criticism.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And then on the flip side, it's always really good to have the positive reinforcement, and remember that. I mean, it's good for everybody, right? But making sure that if there is some of that, the criticism part, that there's always the recognition that, but equally, I mean, we don't want to necessarily be like singled out as, oh, we're the special folks that have the, this trait. We want to fit in and be part of the group and all of that, but have our needs met at the same time. So.
Gotcha, Tammy. All right, makes sense.
Question.
Yeah, great question. Can we squeeze one more in? Yeah. All right, cool. We can do one more question.
Yeah.
What do you got, Mr. Producer?
We have Francis in Houston. He asks, do HSPs cram projects closer to the deadline or rush to get them done quickly early? Great question.
Yeah, typically we don't like the last minute rush. We don't like to be rushed at all.
No.
Usually not, but okay. It can happen because if there's things that make us uncomfortable and we don't want to address them, then, we might like push them off. Typically, we tend to be very organized and structured so that we don't have a lot of surprises, because those are like, big. So we tend to try to avoid surprises, and we want to perform well. So we usually are more more structured and, have things planned out. And then we can have a hard time if something, counteracts that. And
Right. If
throws
there's a cog in the
throws
wheel or
something in.
something. Yeah.
Mhm.
Gotcha.
But yeah, usually it's, but we're all unique. We have our own personality styles. So, but that I would say if an HSP does have that pattern, that could be even more stressful because typically we don't like the, sudden changes. There's, not being prepared, that kind of thing. So that
Understood.
can be probably more challenging.
Yeah. Well, Tammy Goen, I got to thank you again. It's always a pleasure. Thank you for teaching us and, making us aware that about something that people don't really, I would assume, don't think about, and it makes a lot of sense once you explain it. Let me give you the last word here. Anything you want to leave us with, and then once again, tell us how to get a hold of you. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So the best place is on Linktree, linktr.ee, and then / and then just my name, which is TammyGoen. And I have all of the ways that you can get a hold of me, some resources, some links, all of that kind of stuff there. That's the easiest. My website you can get from there. And I would just say, if you are struggling, if you're HSP and you're struggling in your work environment, because that happens quite often, you might just spend some time and ask yourself all those important questions. How do all of these things affect me? Is there anything that can be shifted to support me? And then be able to ask that question: is this job, is this career, is this business, whatever, suited for me? And it's a scary thing to be able to say no, and that means I have to change it. Or look at different options. But if you really want to honor yourself, it's important to make sure, especially for HSPs, but everyone, that we're doing something that serves us, that feeds us, and that isn't creating even more chaos and overwhelm and whatever negativity in our lives, more than just everything in the world already is presenting.
Yeah.
So
Gotcha.
so really that honoring and asking, how is this for me?
Okay. All right. Tammy Goen, thank you so much. Always a pleasure. Thank you to everyone who wrote in.
Thank you so much.
And we'll be right
Yeah.
back. Thank you, Tammy.
Okay. Thanks.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.